a lot in the business community, and certainly a lot more in the last few weeks. When you look at your studies, who is most concerned about AI perhaps taking their job? I mean, what do you see?
So this was something we found very interesting. It was the youngest workers who are most worried, probably because they know that AI is going to get so much better during their lifetimes and become so much more capable. Older workers are relatively unconcerned, but young workers, 3 and 4, worry that AI could take their jobs. That said, there's pretty good news for them from sort of economic history. Typically, new technologies create many higher paying jobs, even though they do replace some lower paying jobs.
Well, it was nice to have fun with that question. I can't let you go, though, without asking, of course, all eyes on the Federal Reserve's March FOMC meeting. After a job report like this, do you have a prediction in terms of what we see with interest rates, or do you think that it still really hinges on what we see next Tuesday with the CPI report?
So I think if I were the Fed looking at this report, I would feel more comfortable about a lower rate increase later in the month. That's because anytime inflation rises, it makes the Fed's job easier, and actually is perhaps a rate increase that doesn't need to happen. That said, everything is going to hinge on the CPI and PPI reports next week. Those will swing it either way.
Julia Pollard, great to have you today. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you very much. Take care.
They just got through discussing about AI, and I just put out a link a while ago in regards to AI, that AI has become so intelligent that it has become vulnerable to humanity. You know, we can create firewalls, we can jump through hula hoops and somersaults whenever it comes to preventing other people from penetrating into our services. But whenever it comes to the supernatural, we can't compete with that. We can't compete with that, and to be quite frank with you, I have seen it more than once whenever various cash registers that are now electronically digital would just act completely up to the point that they had no idea what was going on. I've seen car wash machines that worked perfectly until I got ready to pull up there and put my $12 in to get an automatic wash. I have seen other boo-boos and mistakes again and again and again, and I'm sure other people have too, pertaining to artificial intelligence. They are so powerful today, just as the Bible teaches and talks about, that in the last days they will come down in great wrath, that I'm going to go as far as to say that not only is it possible pertaining to Terminator, the movie Terminator, in regards towards what the plot of the Terminator movie was about, but I'm going to say that now it's actually probable. And the reason why I say that is because I know the powers of the influences that can come in 1,000 trillion different forms. And we think, well, Satan can't work unless he works through humans. Wrong. That's the wrong ideal. And I'm going to tell you what verifies this. The devil basically spoke out against Job and said that he would sift him as wheat whenever there was an argument pertaining to the devil and God. But because there was a hedge around Job, the devil couldn't actually kill Job, but he could distract Job. Okay, he did distract Job. There was other times in the Bible to where, like, people was thrown into the lion's den, like Daniel, or thrown into a firing furnace, and what should have happened did not take place. In other words, it would have been a natural occurrence to have watched a lion eat up a man or human being, or it would have been a natural occurrence of throwing somebody off into a furnace, a hot furnace, and it basically dissolving that human being, basically just burning them to smithereens. So what are you saying? I'm saying that the supernatural forces of evil has intensified to the degree that that's exactly what the Bible's talking about, that will come down in great wrath, because it or he, whichever way you want to characterize it, knoweth its time is short. Whenever it comes to these supernatural evil forces, they can impenetrate in areas, still throwing their poisonous darts at either people or situations, or even artificial intelligence, towards taking over that particular entity, to the degree that I believe that they have the capability of bringing a whole airplane down, or having the capability of taking an airplane that's flying at this particular range, and all of a sudden it dropping out of the sky 3 or 4 or 5,000 feet just within a matter of a few seconds. Now, we've always looked at stuff like this towards it being coincidental. All right? But it's time that the people realize that these forces of nature aren't just coincidental. Whenever it comes to people going over the Devil's Triangle and all their instruments going completely bizarre, crazy, that's not something that's coincidental. Whenever it comes to these energy forces that basically come into an alignment here up onto the planet, that's not coincidental. Whenever you get to looking at the parallel here in the United States, everything north of I think it was the 29th parallel or something like that, that was basically almost like a landing strip right over America. Whenever you get to looking at the pyramids and what goes on with all the rock structures and what's written in them, it's strongly possible that these supernatural entities gain power. Now, they call them UFOs on Alien History Channel, but they're not aliens. They are living beings. They are living beings, and they can conform themselves in any form. They can translate themselves in forms to where they can duplicate themselves. And the reason why I know this is because the evil demonic spirits that was working in this area are the main one that would enter into my father and cause him to become so vicious, temporarily coming unhinged. That same evil spirit working in the same house caused an elderly guy to become just as vicious and mean towards his children, and those children retaliated by shutting the house, locking it all down, and capturing the old man inside the house and burning the house down and killing him. The only reason why that we know that occurred is because they went to a beer joint somewhere around here locally and got to bragging about it, and today I guess they're still doing non-consecutive sentences because of that. But it was that very same spirit that had entered into my father again and again and again, that my brothers and my mother would sit around in determining towards who was actually going to be the trigger man to go in to my father's sleeping quarters where he slept and take a double barrel shotgun and put to his neck and pull both barrels at the same time, and dismembering his head from his shoulder or shoulders, because he become that vicious and that mean in various times. Now, whenever his health started diminishing and he could no longer roar out like a grizzly bear, well, then he had to settle down. And I'm glad that my son did not have to experience those type of experiences towards remembering his grandfather that way. There was lots of things about my dad that was tremendously good, but there was lots of things about my father, my biological father, that was tremendously bad. Whenever I first moved back here in 2014, within a 3-year entity before the evil demonic spirits was run off, these evil demonic spirits had become so clever that I truly believe that they was calling up individuals and aggravating them, and they was making it out like it was me talking, or these evil demonic spirits would appear in window frames while people was subject of looking into the window and thinking that they was actually looking at me, towards me being a peeping Tom. So whenever I talk about these things towards what we're fighting up against, if you have not really and truly intertwined with the forces of evil versus the forces of good, you're probably going to swing at it and miss it by 3 foot. Now, there was a time where the Catholic Roman Church emphasized a great deal on people being possessed. That created a movie, I think it was in the 70s maybe, the Exorcist movie, where somebody laminated off the bed and basically turned their head completely around and throwed up green stuff. Well, Hollywood took it just a bit too far towards taking their head and rolling it completely around and laminating that way to some degree, but in another degree, these evil demonic spirits have become that powerful that they can literally cause the supernatural to now be caused to the natural. And unless you truly are walking with God in every footstep that you take, and unless you truly have the anointing onto your life, you are substance of being attacked at any given time. That's the reason why the Bible teaches us and tells us to pray that we're worthy to escape these things that will be falling upon to the earth, indicating that they will be falling upon to the earth. It's a prophecy that now is occurring. The Bible also says to pray that you're either strong enough to endure the things, or pray that you're can escape the things that are going to be falling upon to the earth. But once more, it is a clear statement in saying that these things would be falling upon to the earth, in addition to what it says in Revelations in regards to the spiritual battle, the spiritual war. So whenever I hear of these things pertaining to AI, artificial intelligence, I'm just trying to let my audience know ahead of time that, first of all, who would have thought in a million zillion years, I'm 60, soon to be 62, whenever they first basically created the internet, then it wasn't long, they had TV and they had radio, and then they had shortwave radio and etc. But who would have ever thought that technology would have moved into the area today where you can literally sit at the palm of your hand and watch literally anything that you want to watch, or look up anything that you want to look up worldwide, all over the world? Who would have thought that 50, 60 years ago? Whenever I was growing up, that's one of the things that they told us again and again and again. The computers are going to take over the world. The computers are going to take over the world. And the majority of us laughed. We didn't think that that was possible. Now today, you can look all over the world, especially with the media and other entities, that artificial intelligence is basically taking over the world. And it's basically the geeks that studied and looked ahead of time in making this happen, or believing that this was going to happen, that actually is part of the reason why that it has happened. But what they did not put into the safeguard wasn't just the fact towards people being able to be hacked, towards smarter people being able to go through the back door. I mean, yeah, you can become smarter than even the thief, to the degree that now you can put up safeguards on top of safeguards, and you can put firewalls up on top of firewalls, to where basically you would have to be an Einstein, and I don't even know that he could do it, if you put the right sequences in place to be able to secure that system. From humanity's standpoint, from a supernatural standpoint, there is no limitations comparable to what we can do or resist towards doing, or resist towards being done, that these supernatural forces can't exceed or override our abilities. These are the things that they did not put into the safeguards as they was inventing these inventions. Today, a lot of this stuff that goes on, regardless whether it's airplane falling out of the sky 4,000 feet, that causes sometimes death and injury, or regardless whether it be people being bamboozled by seeing basically 4 airplanes being turned into missiles and killing approximately 3,000 people all in one day, or seeing trains be derailed, or other major incidences that there's really no logical, ethical reason why that occurred, other than, oh, well, I guess it was just meant to happen. No, nothing is just meant to happen. I mean, they recently had now another train railing incident. This one wasn't quite as bad towards having chemicals on the carriers, but the fact of the matter is, how come we have seen two major railroad industry accidents just within the past month, give or take, right around a month, a little more than a month, and sometimes we go for years without ever seeing a railroad incident? How come all of a sudden we just seen two? Boom, bam. How come now you're hearing more reports from airline stewardess and people that flies routinely on airlines, and all of a sudden something mysteriously strange happening to the cockpit, to the degree that there's really no way to express or explain what happened? And I'm just going to use this for a clear illustration. Was the basketball player that recently crashed and died. I mean, whenever something exceeds the power of humanity to the degree that it can not only take over the instrument panel and give out false readings, but can literally take over that whole invention, regardless whether it's a small invention or a big invention, you're dealing with something on a supernatural level that the only way that you can express it or explain it is that it is beyond human reasoning or human control. This is the reason why that in the last days it is essential, it's imperative that you have a strong relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ. That is a bonding relationship with the Heavenly Father. That way, whenever you are attacked, and I promise you, you will be attacked, if you're truly walking in the ways of light, you become a target. We're dealing with warfare here. We ain't dealing with some kind of mythical ideal. We're actually dealing with something that is more true than what we are, because one day we're all going to die. One day the plants, the life, the trees, everything around us is going to die. But in the spirit world, they don't never die. So in reality, their world is more realer than ours, whenever you look at it from that aspect. But I just want to put this into focus towards that. I have recently put something on one of my social media platforms in regards towards social media having the ability, because there was a major accident that occurred that costed the lives of some people, that they know good and well that it had to have been something that exceeded or took over that particular piece of machinery that basically killed a bunch of people. So as we're designing these instruments or these inventions, we need to keep in mind that it's only by the grace of God that can overpower the wicked demonic spirits from overtaking that instrument. And even at that point, it could still come in sidewinding wise, blindsided wise, towards getting a lick in sidewise, that if you don't watch, you may regain control over the airplane. But then again, if there's not enough power there pertaining to the good to overweigh the bad, you may not. And I'm just telling you the way that God has instructed me to tell you about these things, because we are living in a society today unlike any other society that we've ever dreamed about or thought about, going just as far back as probably 20 years ago, basically in the year 2000. I mean, yeah, a lot of that capability pertaining to artificial intelligence, computer, internet, etc., it was out there, and the vast majority of government institutions like airports and etc., they was already tagging on to that type of power or energy. But the vast majority of us had not yet been introduced to it until basically the smartphone technology come out. Since the smartphone technology is coming out, now it's putting a whole new different meaning on cop abuse towards how many times does this occur? How often has it occurred? Can we dampen it? Can we slow it down? Or is it only going to intensify because now everybody and their brother has a phone, and to see somebody trying to overpower somebody, which usually results in a fight, and sometimes good cops has to use bad tactics, and in doing so, they're going to be putting themselves out there on a limb to where 20, 25, 30 years ago, they didn't have to worry about those things. Well, now we do. And I just about guarantee you that the incident that recently happened down in Memphis, Tennessee with the 5 or 6 police officers that basically killed an innocent individual for no reason, if that camera was not on that pole viewing that incident, the odds of me and you being aware that that incident ever took place would have been like a million zillion to one, which ought to be able to tell you how often that those incidences do take place. Maybe not as crucial as the one that happened in Memphis, or maybe not as crucial as the one that recently they talked about up in Louisville, Kentucky, or even the one that happened in L.A. a few years ago, the Rodney King riots in L.A. Maybe not quite that extensive, but I guarantee you, camera and the focus of a camera and the imagery of a camera can be very, very deceiving in only seeing one side of that. It can be extremely, extremely deceiving. The next thing they're going to talk about, I don't know how true it is. It may be just a paper tiger. I don't know. I hope that it ain't, pertaining to Iran and Saudi Arabia pulling together and formulating some sort of a peace treaty in regards towards what's going on right now over with the Yemens. Please listen.
Take it.
Well, after 7 years of hostility, Saudi Arabia and Iran have agreed to re-establish diplomatic ties. In a deal brokered by China, Middle Eastern rivals agreed to reopen their embassies. Iran and Saudi Arabia also plan to reinstate a 2001 security pact, as well as a trade and technology deal from 1998. The two countries have supported opposing sides in Yemen's civil war, although an unofficial ceasefire in that conflict does seem to be holding. Nada Bashir joins me now from Istanbul. And Nada, practically speaking, what will this deal really look like? I mean, in what areas might we see the biggest changes after this deal?
Well, look, Raul, this is a significant step. As you mentioned, that these are two regional arch rivals, essentially. This is a 7-year diplomatic rift, and we're talking about two of the most significant and politically influential players in the region. And this is going to take form on various fronts. Not only are we expecting to see further diplomatic cooperation between the two parties, the reopening of their respective embassies, but as you mentioned there, a crucial element of all of this will be the activation of a security cooperation deal, which was essentially drawn up back in 2001. This includes a framework for cooperating when it comes to terrorism, when it comes to conflicts, when it comes to drug trafficking, for example, a whole range of areas. So this will be a significant development in a region where those tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran have long threatened security across the entire Middle East region, have certainly been a concern further afield internationally. And then, of course, there is a question of trade and technology cooperation. That framework drawn up back in 1998, and there is significant scope there for that sort of relationship to develop between Saudi Arabia and Iran. But of course, the 7-year rift that has been in place between the two parties has had a significant impact regionally. We're talking about tensions rising in the Gulf. We've seen oil facilities in Saudi Arabia, in the UAE even, being attacked by groups and actors that have been backed by Iran, namely the Houthi rebels in Yemen. And of course, the deepening of conflicts in Syria and in Yemen in turn. Since 2015, we've seen Iran and Saudi Arabia throwing their support and backing between opposing actors. And while there does appear to be some sort of ceasefire, some sort of lasting peace holding at the moment in Yemen, this will certainly go some ways into the calls that we've heard repeatedly now from Saudi Arabia for a more long-term, permanent ceasefire to be established in Yemen. But of course, we have to consider the international stage here, and of course the situation and the context in which this is happening. Iran is finding itself increasingly isolated on the international stage, both in response to the human rights abuses we've seen off the back of the anti-regime protests that are taking place, but also, of course, crucially, Iran's failure to adhere to its commitments to the international community when it comes to its nuclear activity. Those talks, those efforts to revive the 2015 nuclear deal have stalled. They are frozen at the moment, and so Iran is finding itself increasingly looking to its regional allies, its regional partners for backing there. And that's the message we've heard from the foreign minister today, saying that Iran will continue to actively seek further diplomatic relations with its regional neighbors.
And not to look at, as you say, it is a significant development, but I think what is perhaps most interesting is the fact that this is a huge win for China, as it, of course, tries to establish this reputation as being a peacemaker, as a peace broker. What do we know about how China was able to broker this deal?
It's not necessarily a big plus for China, but it's a big plus for humanity. And thank God that somebody in China is finally waking up and realizing that if this thing does evolve into a nuclear attack on the level that it could actually occur, that it's not only going to affect that region, but it's also going to affect theirs too as well, and possibly even ours. So there has to be some sort of sense of common sense whenever you're addressing these type of problems that obviously some of our diplomats could not establish over in the Middle East for the past 30 some odd years. And I declare it towards what didn't happen that should have happened over here in the United States, because whenever you see non-productive activity in regards towards what Ronald Reagan tried to convince the superpowers of, whenever you see that type of non-activity, that actually speaks volumes about, well, the Americans are just full of crap, because we ain't never seen no Juby. We ain't never seen the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions. We ain't never seen a congregation or establishment getting in behind him like we do with Joe Osteen or some of these other international known ministries. And because of it, they have been in doubt about what actually occurred in 1988 that helped to establish the ending of the Cold War to begin with. That's the part that I continue to keep hammering on, in how that I myself have been put out on the limb in this responsibility. That if I did not stand up for the things that I know to stand up for, I guess it was at the attempt of basically trying to bring destruction into their own lives. And you don't really realize how much of an enemy that you have until you have enemies that's willing to destroy themselves just to be able to destroy you. And that's basically what my brother and I run into whenever I come back to Northwest Tennessee in 2014 towards all these demons that was working in all these different families that was coming out of the woodwork, that was attacking us again and again and again right here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. That the courts in and of itself was in behind towards allowing it to happen, that should be looked upon as either anti-Semitism or a deliberate act of dereliction of duty. Because as many times and as many telephone calls that was given to Mike Wilson and the sheriff's department at that time, during the time that he was still sheriff out here, out of all those complaints, out of all those incidences, something should have been taken care of way before the death of a 51-year-old man, which was my younger brother, David Jeffrey Jackson. And just to give you an insight towards how crazy that the situation actually was, every incident that ever occurred happened either at 430 Beech Grove Road, where my brother lived, or at 291 Thompson Road. Every incident, every telephone call that was made come in response towards what was going on out here at this particular corner. But yet now, when my brother actually died, I had a group of people that was cold-hearted enough to say that it was my fault. That I was causing these families to come unhinged and come out here and basically sabotage our property, or are trying to get into a confrontation towards either a one-on-one fight or a group fight towards what was happening out here. Even after my brother and I was concerned about 3 little children, that particular family that just lives right up the road, less than a quarter of a mile from where I live, still has yet to try to make amends or bury the hatchet in what actually occurred. So it actually speaks volumes about what type of people that the devil was working through towards wanting to bring destruction into my life, even at the expense of bringing destruction into their own, much less their children that they claim that they love. Now, whenever you have an enemy, and you know that you have an enemy if you're a true Christian of God, and these people are coming out of the woodwork towards hunting you, basically wanting to destroy you at the expense that they're willing to destroy themselves, then you know that you are in the right grassy row where God intends for you to be. Now, does that make it any easier? No, don't make it no easier. But what the Bible does say is to leap for joy whenever men and women shall persecute you for my name's sake. For so did they to the prophets before you. That's what it gives me the sense of relief or the peace of mind towards, in me knowing that I didn't cause none of this. I didn't cause none of this. That was already flamed up way before I ever come here in 2014. And if you don't believe me, once more, you can look at the records. Freedom of Information Act. Look at the records. Towards identifying that there was problems out here way before 2014, whenever Dennis James Jackson, known as Juby, ever come to 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. And if that wasn't proof enough, with Mike Wilson and their party up there pertaining to law enforcement, as well as Thompson, Johnson, Mike Moore, Pence, Tommy Thomas, if they're not smart enough to see the pattern in what was going on out here at this property, then obviously those people either didn't care what was going on or they wasn't capable of understanding what was going on. And either case, they no longer, as far as I'm concerned, are fit to protect people's well-being. Especially Johnson, that told my brother, after I had went up to the steps and talked to Tommy Thomas myself in Dresden, Tennessee, whenever my brother and I went in there and discussed the problems going on, and Johnson looked at me and said, "You, talking to me, I will not defend. Your brother, on the other hand, I will." Well, that in and of itself was a prejudiced statement. Why? Why was that a prejudiced statement? Because I'd already created some sort of file for myself. But, lo and behold, people didn't want to accept the fact that the file that was being produced was the file that these demons, working through all these different parties, was trying to smear pertaining to assassination character. That actually began in my life 40 plus years ago in a little town that my mother was raised up in, Kenton, Tennessee, whenever I went down there to get help. And the only type of help I got was branded towards being basically a lunatic. And if anybody was the lunatic at the time, it was my father that attacked me, having 64 staples up and down my belly after a 4,000-pound car just got through rolling over on top of me, and I basically had my spleen removed. That I still had the staples in my stomach holding both pieces of skin together whenever he attacked me. But yet now that group of people over there in Kenton, Tennessee at the time, the officials, was so dead set that they was against me, that they would have been willing to support the true maniac, that was my biological father that should have had some sort of psychiatric medication or should have had some sort of counseling back years and years ago, simply because he had anger management issues to the point that he come unhinged, and whenever he come unhinged, he basically tried to kill us. Not once, not twice, not 100 times, but thousands of times growing up. This had become our norm, to the point that we literally had to walk around on eggshells from day to day, not knowing if we was going to get screamed at or we was going to be beaten for simple mistakes like spilling a glass of milk, forgot to take out the garbage, didn't turn out the light whenever I walked out of the room, didn't collect the pop bottles that we had a tendency at that time of just throwing out anywhere, usually around the trees, but they become a hazard whenever somebody would break one of them, and the next thing you know, you had glass, and if you was out there barefooted, it could cause problems. But just simple stuff that we done ignorantly, innocently, that we got basically treated like a grown man at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And I know that there's a handful of people in this area right here where I'm living at still to this day, regardless whether it be the Morgans, regardless whether it be the Hazlewoods, regardless whether it be the Cobles, regardless whether it be the Nelsons, regardless whether it be the Jacobses, regardless whether it be other families like the Willises or the Thompsons or the Robinsons, the Bakers. I could go on and on and on with names, because this is the area that I was raised up in all my life. Though I moved away and done my own little thing and then come back, a great deal of those people are still living. A great deal of them are still living. The Mileses, the Feeneys, the Hayeses, the Whites. Like I said, I can go down a long, long list, and that's just the ones right here. I could go to Kenton and name off another 15 or 20 names. I could go to 3 Point, name off another 15 or 20 names. I could go to Martin and name off another 15 or 20 names. I could go to Sharon, name off another 15 or 20 names. I could go to Greenfield, name off another 10 or 15 names. I mean, whenever you've lived here in the county all your life, ever since you was basically knee-high to a grasshopper, do you not think that you're going to establish some sort of reputation for yourself? Sure you are. Sure you are. Regardless whether you're a drunk, regardless whether you're a farmer, regardless whether you're an attorney, regardless whether you're just a dope addict, you're going to gain a reputation for yourself. I think everybody can agree with that. But the reputation that these people wanted me to have was a reputation towards being a monster. And it began not yesterday, or not even in 2014 whenever I first come back here, but it actually began 40 plus years ago, that now there's a pattern. And I can take you to each event, regardless whether it's the event in Tennessee that recently just happened, or the events up in Kentucky, in Northwest Kentucky, or the events out in Oklahoma, or other events in my life. I can take you to each event, and there will be a pattern. A pattern of how that I was rejected and denied, and actually tried to conscrew what my intent was, or misconstrue, let me use that word, misconstrue what my intent was towards trying to give me a black eye. And now it's backfired on them, but yet no, ain't none of them around here willing to own up to it. But like I said, I know for a fact there's still living people, for living witnesses, that can validate if you was to get them on a stand and make them tell the truth, in which I don't even think that they would know the truth, just like Mr. Melvin Hill and Sis Hill over there said. A lot of them over here wouldn't know the truth if they was to stumble over it, because they don't have no soul. because they don't have no consciousness, because they don't have no guilt or no shame. And it's not just here in Northwest Tennessee. It's not just in Tennessee and Kentucky and Oklahoma, but it's across the nation of people that's basically lost their freaking minds, that has driven this thing off into basically the mouth of the volcano, being $32 trillion in debt. And you have to ask yourself a question: if people such as myself did not stand up in raising the red flag, being the messenger on the wall, blowing the trumpet that the enemy is here. If people such as myself did not stand up in regards to all this, how far would this have actually went? I'm going to tell you how far it would actually have went. It would have went to the point of total destruction here in America because of pride issues. And the Bible says that pride cometh before a fall. And they would rather die and cause the death of the innocent, of their children and their children's children, before they would own up in validating the testimony that I give right near every day for the past 4 years. I don't know how many thousands of videos that I made, or hundreds of videos that I made, but each one of them basically is pointing in the same direction towards a group of people that was basically heathenistic. I mean, whenever I was growing up here at the time, up until one of the Coble girls wound up getting pregnant by a black dude, black people was not allowed over here. And if they caught you with a black person, you was automatically shamed. You was shamed to the degree that now they started treating you the same as they would treat black people around here because of their prejudicism. That's how prejudiced they was. You keep in mind, I'm dealing with the state of Tennessee here. I'm dealing with an area less than 120 miles away or less that wound up assassinating a man on a balcony by the name of Martin Luther King. I'm in basically the belt of the Civil War era down here in the South that still to this day these people have not got over. And you know what? A lot of these elderly people that's probably 10, 15, 20 years older than me, they probably never will get over it. They've had this bitterness and this hate in their hearts for years and years and years, and they really can't identify the difference between hate and love. I've said this to 2 or 3 people. I go around with this vehicle, this little Honda beat-up beater. It's a Toyota Matrix 2005 that looks like you know what. But on the front of it, it says love. L-O-V-E. Love. I guarantee you, if I was to have put hate, there would be more people in this area that could relate to hate than they could love. Especially agape love. Real love. Now, they got lust. Oh, man, they lust for one another every day. But I guarantee you, whenever the rubber hits the road, whenever it comes to being in a room with let's say 30 people and somebody throwed a hand grenade in the middle of the room, the odds of somebody deliberately jumping on that hand grenade to sacrifice their life so the other 29 would live would be like 1,000,000 to 1. There would be like 1 out of 1,000,000 people that would actually be willing to do that. And those people, more than likely, that would be willing to do that would be our police force, our first responders, or those associated towards being a patriot that's willing to sign the dotted line and go to the front lines and fight. Whenever I talk about 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 1,000,000, I really mean that. There's very few people that would be willing to sacrifice themselves for others, including their children, including their grandchildren. Now, maybe their grandchildren, by now, they've done come attached to them to the degree that you would probably find more that would actually be willing to sacrifice their lives for their grandchildren. But whenever you got down to their children, that would be slim to none. And then whenever you got down to somebody that was willing to sacrifice their life for a stranger, then you're talking about the odds being 1,000 to 1 or even 1,000,000 to 1. Very few people. But I've been degraded for that. I've been degraded for my courageousness of challenging basically the Antichrist in 1983 of the poison arrow towards me vanishing or disappearing. I've either been degraded for that, or I've been dehumanized because of that, demonized, or set apart towards being basically like I had a disease. Because why? Because these are the instructions that my Heavenly Father has given unto me towards validating the opening of one of the first seals that so many people around here did not want to take any part of, because they was more interested in the latter part of the scripture of the opening of the second seal than they was the first part. That's why. People that's been deceived, people that's been misled, people that has all this pride that is willing to basically allow for this country to be turned totally upside down. These are the people that I continue to keep talking about on a day-to-day level, that one day there's going to be some very, very serious questions asked, that these people better come up with some very, very serious answers in why that they didn't do what they should have done, or why they done what they know better not to doing. Regardless whether it be a judge, regardless whether it be a mayor, regardless whether it be a governor, regardless whether it be a law enforcement agency, regardless whether it be a federal agency, regardless whether it be the ATF or the U.S. Marshals, there's going to be some very, very serious questions asked pertaining to those that has deliberately come up against the founder of the Windmill Ministries. And whenever they're asked these questions, I just pray to God for their own sakes. Regardless whether you be a judge or just a prosecuting attorney, I pray to God that you will have a decent answer. Especially those poor people up there in LBL that I was basically going up against, about 10 or 12 of them that worked up there at the time. Between the year of 2007 up until basically 2012. A 5-year period. Those people purposely tried to destroy my life, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And the third time, whenever they went all the way to Oklahoma to get me, and they took me to LaGrange psychiatric ward and feeding me full of poison, which basically caused me to go from 240 to 340, like in a 6-week period. And because I've got old injuries on my ankles, it has added insult to injury. And that's exactly what they wanted to do. Now, they'll tell you, oh, no, we didn't want to do that to Mr. Jackson. Bullshit. That's exactly what they wanted to do to Mr. Jackson. Why is that? Because of the devil within them. Just like Miss Flemings, that was my public defender the last time up in Trigg County. She said, Dennis, you have not done nothing wrong. She said, it's obvious that it's not what you have done, but who you have done it to. And whenever you have a law, regardless whether it's the Kentucky law, the Tennessee law, the Oklahoma law, whenever you have law officials that are operating this way towards personalizing their behavior and how that they're going to personally attack certain people, or not giving them people protection, knowing them that them people's already paid their price to society. They've already done paid their due. Even if I was guilty of that in which what they was trying to promote me as, I've already done my deal. It wasn't like I violated some sort of a judge's order whenever I made 2 telephone calls to LBL this last time. And it for darn sure wasn't likely that I threatened any of them. So what kind of excuse do they have? They don't. In the meantime, while I watch my country get fall apart, I know that under the guidelines of the teachings of Christ, I really don't have the security in hiring an attorney and going after these people. Besides that, I don't even know that I could. Why is that? Why is that, you may be asking? Well, I've used this for the same terminology. It's the same thing as the Survivor program that they had on few years ago, where they'd go through all these rigmaroles and all this different challenges and stuff on this island, and then there towards the last, everybody'd pull together and they'd have to vote one of them off the island because they didn't like them, or they didn't pull their load, or for whatever reason, they just wanted them off. Well, whenever everybody has ownership in the island, it's hard to go after the people that are part of the one percenters. When everybody has 3 strikes and you're out, other than them people that gave those strikes to everybody else, it's really difficult in going after that type of a mob. It is a clan. It's the same thing as mobsters that we read about that at one time used to be in various areas of being gangsters. And the reason why that they're gangsters, kind of like the 5 guys down there in Memphis, that now the world has seen their ugly side. A gangster is somebody that stands behind the gun or stands behind the badge in trying to prove himself right while everybody else, or those that he's picking on or choosing to pick on, is wrong. And that is a gangster type mentality. Especially whenever David and I both went together to Dresden, Tennessee before they got wiped out up there with a tornado in the old building right beside City Hall. And we was talking to Johnson. And Johnson brought up the fact about he didn't know that the 7th Infantry was still in power. That goes all the way back to the Civil War era. But it was David and I that went up there trying to get some sort of resolution to the problems out here. Whenever he looked at me, now he'll probably lie to you and tell you that he didn't say this. But he told me, Juby, I will not represent you. I will not defend you. David, on the other hand, he said, I will. But even at that, he still let David down. And my brother David didn't even have a record. Or if he did, it done already been expunged. It done already been dismissed from his record. David was not a savage. David was not some sort of a barbaric heathen. David was doing what David knew to do towards allowing for me to come back to this property, because David knew that I had just as much of a right of being here as he did. I didn't try to control David's life, and David didn't control my life. Now, does that mean that my brother and I got along like 2 peas in a pod? Why, no, we did not. And I'd be sitting here lying to you if I told you that we did. I don't know of too many brothers and sisters that do get along like 2 peas in a pod. It's like very few and far between. Did my brother and I have some arguments? Sure we did. Did we have some clashes? To some degree, but we never did go into blows about it. He was my brother, for God's sake. Me and him went through hell growing up. Either he was trying to rescue me or I was trying to rescue him, because both of us was being terrorized by a freaking maniac at the time. But now you try to go to all these people around here and see if they'll come clean on that. Because I know that they know the truth about my father. And I know they know the truth about what my father done. But these people had put it into their minds and into their hearts that they was going to believe a certain concept about one of Bob's boys. And if the truth be known, just like Melvin Hill said whenever I first moved back here, that bought our property over here beside us, Melvin said, if you was a gangster, if you was a meth maker, if you was a dope taker, if you was an alcoholic, if you was a wife beater, if you was a pedophile, if you was any and all the above, they'd come near accepting you, Dennis, than they would had towards you coming back here. That's the reason why Melvin and Sis basically suggested for me that if I was you, because they know the yik-yak and the talk that had done already been produced around here during the time that they was talking about me and behind my back. They know. They said, Dennis, if I was you, I'd move. I'd go down the road. We know what type of community that you're dealing with here, and if it was me, I would pack up and go. And I told Melvin and Sis, and this was way before my brother ever died, I said, I'm not leaving. I said, the only way I'm going to leave is just like my brother said that he was going to leave. I'll leave in a body bag. And that's the way I'll leave off of 291 Thompson Road if they're going to make it that appropriate to go ahead and take me out. But they're so cowardly, they don't want to take me out. They don't want to turn me into a martyr. They just want to agitate and aggravate and torment my life and bring all kinds of inflictions up into my life. That way, instead of Juby being the dragon slayer, Juby actually gets slain by the dragon. You see what I'm dealing with down here? You never did have dragon slayers. You never did have people that was against homosexuality, or people that was against wife abusers, or people that was against pedophiles, or people that was against people that was lazy, or people that was nothing more than thieves. You never did have those people that was standing up towards being that dragon slayer. And I'm using that as a metaphor towards all the things that violates God's commandments, is basically under the format of being a dragon. Something evil. So they never did want Juby to be a dragon slayer. They never did want Juby to take charge and be in control towards being predominant or being influential in the neighborhood. And boy, did they ever show themselves towards how they felt about it. And even to this day, they're so two-faced. Whenever I do approach some of them, they'll get all offensive and get all out of shape. And the first thing one of them will say was, well, Juby, we ain't never done nothing wrong to you. We ain't never done nothing wrong to you, Juby. Directly, you're absolutely correct. You never have done nothing to me. But you never stood in my corner neither. You never defended me. You never became that same spiritual person that Jesus intended for us all to be towards being the dragon slayers, going against the rapists, going against the pedophile, going against the bank robbers, going against the thieves, going against the liars. You never did stand with me. So the way I see it is the same way that Jesus Christ seen it. If you're not for me, you're against me. And proof is in the pudding for the past 30 plus years towards how a community did not stand with the founder of the Windmill Ministries missions, including my own family. And boy, wouldn't they love to blame it on everybody else towards it's everybody else's fault, including Juby. It was Juby's fault. Juby is the one that we should blame for all this. Looking for an scapegoat. Wanting to blame everybody else but themselves. Oh, what a tangled web that they do in fact weave. When it's all said and done with, they realize that they have been deceived. But what's even worse than being deceived is that after they've known that they have done wrong, they're still not willing to admit to their own little ding-dong that they have caused to bring upon to society this way. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I done my part. I put my message out there. Various preachers, teachers, educators, Tommy Moore himself said that various people has brought it in front of him in his court, that I was some sort of like a shoe bomber, that I was demanding some sort of demands from the public. I ain't demanded nothing. What has happened here, as far as I am concerned, it could not have occurred to a better group of people. They brought it upon themselves. They brought it upon themselves. And as the things that are constantly, consistently, even getting worse on a day-to-day level, I'm standing back watching my country be torn apart, that I truly, truly love. But at the same time, I'm saying, okay, They done this. They caused this. They allowed for this to occur. And we're still not seeing a true spiritual movement coming from the Windmill Ministries missions. So as I'm still shaking the dust off of my feet, I'm still seeing the very prophecies come true that Jesus said would occur if they would not accept you. What did Jesus say? He said that it would be worse than Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's where we're heading. Coming near a neighborhood near you. Once more, I thank God that China has enough insight to realize that if there is a major confrontation over there in the Middle East, it will affect their lives too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this isn't the first time we've seen attempts and efforts to broker some sort of agreement, some sort of negotiation between Iran and Saudi Arabia in 2021, 2022. We saw efforts led by Iraq and also by Oman to try and get this agreement underway. Now, after 5 days of intensive talks in Beijing with high-level delegations from Iran and Saudi Arabia, this deal has been reached with China brokering this agreement. Now, this is a significant shift, of course. We do know that China is expanding its efforts to establish diplomatic and, of course, economic ties in the Middle East. And we're talking about a region, the Gulf in particular, which has long been considered under the sphere of influence of the United States. So this will certainly rival that. We are seeing China trying to deepen those relations with the Middle East, but trade and economy appears to be the key focus at this point. And as we begin to see Iran and Saudi Arabia focusing more on trade relations on that front, China will certainly continue to be a key player in those discussions.
It is fascinating developments. Nada Bashir, thank you, in Istanbul there. And let's stay with China now. China's president is extending his grip on power, securing an unprecedented third term. Xi Jinping is now the longest-serving head of state in communist China after Parliament rubber-stamped his reappointment as president on Friday. Selena Wang is in Beijing with the details.
The role of the president in China is largely ceremonial, but it is still symbolic and important that Xi Jinping has secured an unprecedented third term as China's president. It's a reminder that he's got an iron grip over the country. It solidifies his control and makes him the longest-serving head of state of Communist China since its founding in 1949. Now, back in 2018, Xi scrapped the two-term limit on the presidency, meaning he could stay on as head of state for life. But his true power comes from being the head of party and military. These are roles he was already reappointed to at the Communist Party Congress back in October. So what we saw today was political theater. He got more than 2,900 unanimous votes from China's rubber-stamp legislature. Then they all stood up for a standing ovation. At this ongoing big political event, we'll also see reshuffles in leadership roles and state organizations, changes that will all further increase Xi's power. On Saturday, Li Qiang, who's one of Xi's most trusted proteges, he's expected to be chosen as China's premier. He was the former party secretary of Shanghai and oversaw the brutal 2-month COVID lockdown last spring. And the team of officials that run China's economy is also getting a big shakeup. The 4 main men, unlike their predecessors, have not been educated in the West or are seen as having little experience dealing with international financial organizations. But what they do have in common is that they're close allies of Xi. So what should we expect to see in this coming term? We should expect to see increasing Communist Party control at home and this continued, assertive, more aggressive foreign policy abroad. Beijing views its actions as trying to restore China's rightful standing in the world as a great power. And it's clear there's not going to be an easy off-ramp to US-China tensions. Xi Jinping's view of the bilateral relationship is turning more pessimistic. Earlier this week, he made the rare move in directly accusing the US of leading a campaign to contain and suppress China. It is rare for him to directly call out the US. Then the following day, China's new foreign minister warned that conflict with the US is inevitable if the US does not change course. To the people here in China, the message from Beijing is that the US is trying to choke the country off.
Why are they doing that? You have to ask yourself the question, why is our diplomats doing that? They keep accusing China of stealing, in which possibly they have stolen some technology, and they have got a hold of the bull by the horns, and they have outcompeted us. But by and large, we opened ourselves up to that. We gave that technology. We gave them the ability to come over here and basically take the bull by the horns and compete, and they beat us in competition. So why would our diplomats here in America be trying to piss the people off over in China? And I realize that the COVID deal had a big influence on what has occurred worldwide, but I still say that it's just as much of a possibility that China itself may have been set up, entrapped by somebody else that gave the appearances that it was deliberately done or even accidentally done over in a lab, but it could have been somebody else that done it. So why is certain people so dead set that they're wanting basically a major superpower like China or other people throughout the country to piss them off over here? Is it that they know that they have failed, and rather than come clean in their mistakes, it's easier to get somebody to basically just press the big buttons and just end all of our lives over here, even though out of, let's say, the 1,000 people that was involved in this resistance movement, or let's say 5,000, because it was spread abroad over a 30-year period, and it did go out not just here in Northwest Tennessee or West Tennessee, but it spread abroad over into Kentucky and over into Oklahoma and up in Washington, D.C. So let's say it was 5,000. Is 5,000 lives worth sacrificing the other 300 million? I don't think so. Once more, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. And eventually, I feel like, or I hope, that those few that was innocent will have enough decency about them that they'll put those other 5,000 in their place. But in the meantime, while that's not happening, what we are seeing is more chaos over here. We're seeing more unanswered questions. We're seeing people complain about what's going on in Washington, but nobody's willing to pick it out or point it out towards what the solution needs to be. It's chaotic over here. So I can understand the reason why the leader over in China would say what he said about the Western world. Just like I can understand the reason why Russia has said what they've said, because once more of a non-participant, active, so-called believers that didn't care enough about their own man that they was willing to stand with him. That they was willing to stand with him towards not only him, but towards us, all of us, being dragon slayers. What I'm seeing is full hypocrisy, lukewarmness. And if that's what it's going to take, is for God to basically sever the wicked from among the just until the wicked become so weak that then finally the just will stand up. If that's what it's going to take, then let it take that. Because as far as I'm concerned, it couldn't happen to a better group of people towards allowing for all this crap to happen and to get this far out of focus. And I don't know if it was because of the hippie era. I don't know if it was because of that in which what took place that shouldn't have taken place, that should have taken place, vice versa, in 1988 during Ronald Reagan's administration, or what. But I'm just sitting back, twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the big grand enchilada to fall. In the meantime, it's breaking my heart, and it's devastating my life even that much more, like it is others that can't take the pressures, that can't obviously be strong enough to resist this evil demonic movement that has plagued America and our America land. It's been an infestation of wickedness that has been brought here by the wicked one, that now the inflictions are far and wide, that nobody can debate or argue about. But yet, no, I still don't see a solution in regards towards the problems of a group of people that's willing to stand up in being those dragon slayers. And until I do, I guarantee you, things over here will continue to go backwards the way that they've been going now for the past 30 plus years. I thank God that somebody over there in China could foresee that the Saudis and the Iranians needed to pull together towards bringing some sort of a solution in regards towards a chaotic scene that obviously was going to be directed towards Israel. And then after it effectively destroyed Israel, then it would effectively destroy us. Because it was already announced that after the Sharia law, that type of evil, demonic Muslim movement, after they got through pertaining to the old Persian Empire thinking and tactics, that after they got through with Jerusalem and Israel, they was coming after America. That has never been taken off the table. And as far as I'm concerned, it's still on the table, especially since 9/11. I want to thank you for your time. Good luck to each and every one of us. I want to say good luck to all of us. God bless America. God bless our military, especially. God bless our endeavors towards where we go from this moment on. Just want to say thank you for your prayers. Heaven help us all, and shalom. Thank you.